If I spoke to my friends the way I speak to my child, I'd have no friends left. That line hit me like a punch to the gut. So many parents are stuck in this sort of survival mode. They're yelling, they're bribing, they're walking on eggshells, and then crying behind closed doors and wondering how it got this hard. On this week's podcast, I asked child therapist Ashley Gobeil, how do we repair the damage when we've already said or done too much? And her answer changed everything. You guys are going to want to hear this. Welcome to the Soaring Child Podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. This is Dana Kay here with another episode of the Soaring Child Podcast. I spoke to a mum recently who said something that really stuck with me. She said, I used to imagine our family would be the one on the holiday cards, laughing in the kitchen, snuggling on the couch, sort of hugging at the airport, saying goodbye. But now it just feels like I'm always the bad guy. And that really hit me hard because, I think a lot of parents feel that way, especially as kids get older. We all come into parenting with this picture in our minds, a snapshot of what family life will look like. And so if you're watching on YouTube, I'm holding up that photo frame right now. And if you're listening, just close your eyes and imagine that frame, the one you pictured before, I don't know, like the meltdowns and all the arguments and the resistance before ADHD made connection feel so much harder. What did you see in that photo? What does your version of that frame look like today? In today's episode, I am joined once again by our resident child and family therapist, Ashley Gobeil, and we're diving deeper into parenting teens. But wait, if you don't have a teen yet, do not tune out. We're also talking about how to set your younger child up now so those teen years feel less rocky later on. Ashley always brings such a wealth of experience. And as always, she shares so many practical insights you can actually use. So let's jump in. Hi, Ashley. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
Hello. Yeah, thanks for having me again. Pumped to kind of dive deeper into this. It's just an ongoing theme coming up.
It is. And I just love when you come to the podcast every single time. I talk about it, almost with all my clients because, we just have such a great dynamic. And I think that, really what you preach is all about nervous system regulation. And I just love how our nervous systems regulate each other. And that's one thing that I share with families in our program because it just shows how much control we have over regulating someone else's nervous system as well. So we're going to dive deeper into that a little bit later. But we had such amazing feedback after your last episode, especially from parents of tweens and teens. So guys, if you're listening and you haven't heard that episode yet, go back and check it out. We'll definitely link it in the show notes below. So let's start there for a moment. Why do kids with ADHD often sort of need a different parenting lens, especially as they get older, and what shifts in that parent-child dynamic that can make things feel, I don't know, harder or just different as they grow?
Yeah. Okay, so there's like kind of two parts in that. So why do kids with ADHD need a different parenting lens? Well, I think you spoke about it earlier. What I consistently preach is around that nervous system regulation. So kids with ADHD, it's essentially like an arousal regulation issue. Chronically, we are so easily activated. And we know, we've talked about it before on the podcast, so many factors why that impact their little systems. And they are often they're often in trouble a lot at school. They're often being corrected. So, a lot, their behavior is really tricky. And so how we parent that is so, so key. What's going on in their little bodies and brains means that as the parents, we do need to hold a different lens. We have to have a deeper understanding. But that said, like, so much of my parenting approach is across the board for all kids, but it's like specifically for kids who are struggling with ADHD, we absolutely need to have a particular mindset. As you said, especially as they get older, because as kids start to move towards, and I feel like it's younger and younger a little bit, that preteen, that like 11, 12,
even younger. I mean, I've had families inside our program saying, "Oh my gosh, I've got my 8-year-old, and she's like a 14-year-old."
I know. I think so much that is our exposure to social media and screens. Like, that's a whole other chat, isn't it? But it's like you as they grow older, the relational dynamics can start to shift. But usually, what's actually shifting is the child's development. They are entering into a new developmental phase where they're playing with independence. They're identity forming, they're individuating, they're exploring, and they often need a lot of external scaffolding and more flexibility, but they still need us as the parent, as that connect back to and be that safe, secure base as they grow. It's like they think, and they do need some more independence, but they actually still so need us as that safe, secure base. And
I think that ties exactly into what I said at the beginning, that I love when you come to this podcast because our nervous systems regulate each other. When I'm, really high energy and you're so calming, you can see how I actually calm down as well. And I think that's a perfect example of like, I'm in my mid-40s, 45 to be exact. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And so I'm an adult and I can still have my nervous system regulated by someone else. And so I think that that's a perfect example of how our kids, whether they're a teen or not, or a preteen or a 6-year-old, how much they need us.
Yeah, because we've talked about this. I think you said it's, a big moment you had where I shared that we actually hold the keys to our kids' nervous system. So if we know kids with ADHD have a nervous system that struggle, are more easily activated, if like we are that little anchor, So even if their development is shifting, we'll talk more about that, how we can be, in that and shifting with them with the dynamic. And as they move into teens, we see, I spoke about this with somebody yesterday, the demands of school get bigger, the expectations get increased, there's hormones, there's emotional intensity, but there's actually a lot happening around the young person that actually starts to influence. They need more sleep, their brain, we talked about this in the last podcast, their brain's under construction and pruning. So there's all this kind of stuff happening around them that can impact on how they can be in the dynamic and in the relationship.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, as we mentioned earlier, this podcast episode, even if you don't have a teen, this is the perfect time to get started with some of the things that we're going to talk today, because when it's like learning a language. A new language, you have to keep practicing, and if you start practicing earlier, it's going to get easier for you as your child moves into those teen years. Now, last time you were here, you touched on the peer relationship, the peer orientation, and that sort of like social belonging that goes on with teens, especially how teens might start turning to their friends instead of their parents for guidance. And that really stuck with a lot of parents in our community. And one thing we hear often inside our program, my child used to be so close to me and now they just push me away. So like, why might kids, especially those with ADHD, start rejecting their parent input or looking more to their peers? What's going on there, and how can parents stay connected but also sort of like influential during those phases.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that's such a big theme that comes up in the parents that we work with, where it's like, why is my kid starting to reject me or resist? And we see that as like a big ADHD symptom when things are exacerbated behavior. It's that protest, that resist. And often it's, there's lots of different factors happening, but a really big one that starts to happen as they age, or even in those earlier years, if there's been many, many years of strain and stress in the family unit, the child's kind of trust that the adults have got this starts to wear away, or the trust that they're accepted or that their emotions are tolerated, because kids don't quite know how to separate out behavior from emotion. It's all just mushed in, right? So when we say, we don't allow that behavior, that kids get punished for a particular behavior, they actually think they're also being punished for the feeling. So, the stress that happen over time, there starts to be that strain and more distance in the relationship. But also another huge reason, I spoke about this yesterday actually with a mum, is because her kiddo is resisting everything, like literally saying no before she could even finish her sentence, like it's like, no, like the instant defiance. And it's so funny because some of that is like, they'll say no, even if they want to do it, or even if they for them, but it's like that instant need to, no, I have to be in charge and, kind of push my parent aside. And a lot of what looks like laziness or defiance and that stuff, those labels that kind of come into play, especially in teens, it's often an ADHD difficulty. It's sometimes developmental. It's not deliberate. It's, what's going on in the nervous system. Those are saying that kind of thinking brain that helps with planning and impulse control and organization and, all that executive functioning stuff. I mean, we know goes under construction. It's still wiring well into their 20s. And from your work in the program is when kids are fully exacerbated of inflammation, like that brain, everything's just haywire, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's kind of like having some realistic expectations. Like we talk about, they're not giving me a hard time, they're having a hard time. They're still learning, as opposed to they should know better by now because they're 12. It's like, okay. But they're still struggling. You're not going to get consistency sometimes in adolescence. And they're going to need a lot of scaffolding and invitations to accountability and holding that perspective of, my kid's not having a hard time. Or sorry, my kid's not giving me a hard time. They're having a hard time. Is going to help you move into more compassionate,
So,
space.
We know that. And, when we can, accept that and move forward with that, as they move into teens, they're going to more and more reject our input, and look more to their peers for that input. And so, can we talk a little bit about why that happens?
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest factor is the relationship between the parent and the kiddo. And so if there has been, which is kind of what I was going with that, like where there's been more strain, more struggle, and not enough repair, which we're going to talk about, like what does repair actually look like? The more difficulties without that repair, the more stress, the more vulnerable that kid's going to be when they hit adolescence. The more likely they are going to peer orient, use their adult less as a resource, and they're going to rely more on peers, which is a fairly risky little space to be if they're not going to come back in and out of you. Yeah. And yes, it is a time where they're developing independence and all that other stuff. But what I see in my work is teens not actually becoming very independent, but independent from the parent and dependent on peers. So they're actually not really growing that independence and self-discipline and self-regulation. They've actually just rejected and ditched the parent and actually using peers as an emotional resource and fully dependent. And as I was saying, it's a little risky because it's now we're using another kiddo my age to regulate.
Very risky.
they don't have developed emotional regulation.
No.
And
even if their friends don't have ADHD, or even if their friends don't have any challenges, that teenager, like, I think about my older son's, friends, like, yeah, that teenager's brain's under construction as well. So I love how you put that.
Yeah, and
risky behavior.
Honestly, yeah, it's like their brain isn't fully grown. Some adult brains, we're still growing.
Yes.
But also, and some of that factors around the struggle is traditionally, I mean, yes, there are a lot of parents who are really practicing that more conscious parenting and tuning into emotions. That's all what we do in the program. But traditionally, and a lot of the time, and you've spoken with this, Dana, is parents can get in the loops of so much stress that we're desperate, and we fall on these tools of like punishment, consequences, yelling, bribery, those traditional ways of parenting where kids have been parented through fear, threats, or shame-based parenting.
Yeah.
Fear of things being taken away, fear of punishment, fear of being disconnected, the rewards and consequence approach, where there's so much focus on behavior without connection or without focusing on the child's experiences and emotions.
So before we dive a bit deeper into that, because I know that loop very, very well from the past when, we used to struggle. But, when if we just take a step back and think about when that child starts rejecting that parent or looking towards their peers, how can we as parents stay connected with them? How can we help be sort of like influential without them knowing that we're being influential, during the phase that's happening?
Yeah. I was like, how do I just want to backtrack that thought is one of the ways we can stay influential that we talk about this lots in the program is having that deeper understanding as how did we get here? Yeah. And as I was saying, it is so much of that rupture in the relationship. And so we have to drop, like, I cannot stress it. We have to drop the controlling, coercive parenting approaches, especially when we get to teenage years, because it's actually only going to exacerbate. And I know that's so hard in the moment and it takes a lot of work, which we'll speak to, but it's like we have to drop permissive parenting where there's no boundaries because we're scared of our child's emotional distress. And so we avoid limits and boundaries. We've also got to drop that strict, fear-based punishment kind of model as well, because if we're using that in childhood or when we start to hit adolescence, especially when they hit the teen years and there's that relational strain, it's like things kind of hit the fan because, as I said, they're orienting naturally in some ways. Parents' anxiety increases as the child's desire for more independence increase. And, parents get quite anxious, but it's like teens kind of get to that space of like, hold up. I don't have to be scared of you anymore. I'm not scared of your consequences. I don't care about your rewards and punishments or your sticker charts. I'm bigger. What are you going to do about it? Like you can see teens.
And it's like this perfect storm that's going to start happening. Yeah.
Totally. And so as a parent, your anxiety goes up. She's like, I've totally lost control. And, those teens are kind of like, you haven't really seen me or connected to me in my emotional experience. And we haven't repaired our relationship in 10 years. So I'm going to do my own thing. And that's a really vulnerable place to be. And, it's that rebel that we see. And as you said, so how do we stay connected? How do we influence? Is the work is going to be building or rebuilding, depending on where you're at, trust and connection. And you have to shift how you turn up in your parenting.
Yeah.
If you're using, and we've talked a lot about this in the other podcast, using curiosity, consciously going, how do I need to show up in a way that gives my child the message that I want to understand them, that I do accept their emotions, and how do I do repair where there's been many years possibly of damage being done? How do you stay connected when they're at their worst? There's a mom I'm working with in the program many years, and our kid's now like 15. It's so tricky. But the biggest piece of work we've done is like, you got to keep showing up, just show up and repair and notice how you're reacting and be vulnerable. And they've had to fully shift the way they've parented. And I was like, you know what you can do for those listening, if you've got an older teen and you're like, all of a sudden activating, like, I've done all this parenting and things are so tough. It's never too late to repair. And it can be that repair of like, just acknowledging, you know what? Actually, things have been really, really tough for the last few years, really stressful. And I'm so sorry that this is how parts of your childhood has been. You've noticed I've been stressed. And, you know, I don't feel like we're close. I'm sure you feel it too. Things have been really, really tough and I want to do better. And I'm going to try, I'm going to work on myself. I mean, I can even feel the emotion when I say it.
I'm getting goosebumps right now, actually, when you said that, because like, that is such a vulnerable place to be, but I can see the tears in your eyes right now.
My little self, because I had this chat with someone the other day on the phone. It's like, it's never too late. And think about where it brings up such beautiful emotion is how many of us would have loved to hear some of that in our own childhood of just that, no, you're not a drama queen, you're not this, you're not that. It's like, wow, I'm so sorry that things have gotten this tough for us in our family.
Yeah.
And I love you despite, and you're important and you matter to me no matter how you've turned up, no matter how bad your behavior's been, it's so profound.
Have you ever read a parenting book or went through a parenting course and thought to yourself, but this doesn't work for my child? I know I have. Parenting a child with ADHD can be challenging. Typical parenting strategies don't often work. And that's why when I started thinking about what parents of children with ADHD really need, I knew the answer had to do with parenting. The ADHD Thrive Jumpstart for Parenting provides parents with practical tips and tricks that actually work for neurodiverse children. Created with the help of a child and family therapist, this online program is the go-to resource for parents of neurodiverse children. Take a moment today to check it out at ADHDthriveinstitute.com/parenting. Again, that's ADHDthriveinstitute.com/parenting. Now let's get back to today's episode.
This is so powerful, Ashley. I mean, every episode that we do together is so powerful, but just that vulnerability. And I mean, I know, just hearing that and, having to do something like that, it's scary. And I'm sure listeners out there are just going, because I can feel that, even though, like we're in a good place, I can feel that emotion as well. And so, okay, like we know what we need to do, but let's just talk about, that conflict loop, because I know that back in the day, we used to be in one of those. Our family sort of felt stuck in this cycle of yelling and nagging and punishing, or storming off or slamming doors. Where's a good place to begin shifting that dynamic, especially if it's been going on for a while? Like, how do you start fresh? I mean, I think I know the answer. We were just talking about it, but like, how do you start fresh without like being controlling? And if a parent feels like they've already said or done too much, once we've laid it all out on the table, how do we begin to repair that connection?
Yeah. That's it. It's like you can have that conversation a couple times, but it's like you actually then have to like talk the talk.
Yes, exactly.
I remember a parent once saying to me, I'm saying to my kid all the time, I'm here for you if you want to talk, and anything, something like that. And I was like, yeah, but have you been showing that? So it's like we have to kind of show it as well. Yeah. And often what I see happen when I'm working with parents and kids really struggling with ADHD is they end up in the eggshell atmosphere, where it's like the child seems to dictate the atmosphere of the home. And I often say, hey, yes, I get how we've got there, but almost taking that step back and going, actually, if I leave my kid in control and my child, like if it's like my child gets to dictate the atmosphere of the home because of their moods and stress, we're then orbiting around the child, right? And we put full responsibility, relinquished our control to some degree to that child who's now in charge of everybody's moods. The unformed brain, the dysregulated nervous system's all of a sudden in charge. And it's like, I need to step back and control as the parent. How do I take that? It's like, no, I need to be the one, the heart of the family's nervous system. And I've got like kind of 10 little tips that I wanted to flag, but so one being, try not to take things personally. When your kid and your teen tells you they hate you, tells you that they hate their life, and you know that you're the worst parent in the whole world and you've ruined everything, like, you know, whatever those things they
Sorry,
say.
I'm laughing because, you know, we're going through one of those stages with my younger one right now. I feel so bad for my kids, but because I share all the dirty laundry on the podcast. But you know, my little one, he's going through that right now. He's, you know, about to turn 12, but he's like, you know, you're the worst parent ever. I hate you, and yeah.
Where you parent me and put limits, and yeah, so it's like, how do I not take this personally? Because really, what they're sharing with you in those heat of the moment, really high emotional distress moments is, I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I don't know how to manage this emotion. I feel out of control. I'm really scared. I'm worried that you're not going to like me or I'm going to be not understood. You know, it's like, what? I talk about this, like, what's underneath the words? That's just the word vomit. Underneath that is usually their fears, their worries, their beliefs. It's not their wishes. You know, kids like, I want to hate my parent and make everything really different. No. You know, they don't have the skills yet in the articulation to be like, I'm really overwhelmed and upset, mum. And, you know, it's instead, it's like, I hate you and I hate everything. Especially those kiddos with ADHD where it's like so much dysregulation often in the system. So try not to take things personally. And connection before correction being the second one. We talk about that a lot. Connect. Just, you know, that like pause before we rush into punishment and correcting behaviors. Connect to them, you know, with, especially for teens, approach with some curiosity as opposed to demanding compliance. Yeah. Kids with ADHD often hear all day long what they're doing wrong from home, from school, even from themselves internally, their own dialogue. So much of the healing, you know, shift to kind of deliberately notice and kind of name what's going on right now. Like, hey, or acknowledging the good little wins. I appreciate that, you know, you're trying to let me know how, even when your kid Donna says, I hate you and you're the worst parent ever. Okay, you're really, really angry right now. And I can see you're trying to let me know how upset you are with me. Like, you really want me to know how mad I am. As opposed to, don't, you know, you should appreciate everything that I do. And, you know,
you're being disrespectful. How dare you say that to me?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what's the kid actually trying to say? So when we can actually connect and be kind of curious, that's going to go a long way, even though it's really, really hard. Yeah. Repair. This is number 3. Repair is going to be your friend, guys, especially through the teen years. But for kids with ADHD, when there's rupture after rupture and correction after correction, and repair is not just saying, I'm sorry. It's so much bigger. Okay. Where there's been conflict or a rupture, name it and model accountability. Hey, I got frustrated earlier. I was feeling really overwhelmed and I didn't handle it so well. It probably made you feel a little bit worried when I screamed at you or I yelled, or maybe it made you feel less close to me or bad about who you are. Let's try this again. I'm really trying to work on my big feelings, just like I know you are. Huge. You're modeling emotional identification. You're taking responsibility. This is all the stuff that we want to teach kids. And it's so funny because how often I see this happen, and it's so cringe, but I get it because how we're conditioned. Like parents, a kid does something to hurt another kid or upset, and we're like, say sorry. And we like push them to say sorry, but there's no actual, like, they don't even really know why. No one's really heard anybody's feelings. But also how often we as adults find it hard to take accountability for behavior. So when we can model it, that's where they're going to learn it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huge. I think I mentioned this earlier. Keep showing up. keep connecting to them. That mum I was talking about earlier who's got a teen, she's showing up no matter what he's throwing at her. It's like, I'm not scared of you and I'm not scared of your feelings because I'm your mum and it's my job to keep you safe and be here for you. Like nothing's going to change that, you know, and keep inviting them into family time and connection and, you know, finding ways to spend time with them, even if they're resisting. But it still means holding limits, boundaries, and being sturdy. A lot of parents in the program go, you want me to be conscious and talk about feelings?
And I know that a lot of listeners are out there will go, okay, you know, like, yeah, I can do all of that. But then like at the same time, how do you do all of that and hold the boundaries? It's sort of like contradicting each other.
Yeah. Well, you bring it in beautifully of like, I can still hold a space for my child's emotional experience. You can be mad. You know, let's say, I don't know if you had the example, John, if your kiddo saying, oh, you know, hey, you know, you're the worst, da, da, da. Is it usually in response to a limit? Is it usually in response to a boundary? You know, it's like, we've turned off screen time, or we've said, no, you can't have ice cream for dinner, or you can't, for teens, you can't go to that party where it's unsupervised. We get to still be in charge of like, an anchor into like, I can't let you do that. I've talked to your dad, or I've talked to your other parent. That's something we're not able to let you go to that party. They're going to throw angry, da, da, da. I know you're really hurt and angry. This feels so unfair. I know this really, yeah, you can still be in that connection and be with them in their emotional experience. Let them be mad at you, but still be like, I'm not wavering on that. Especially if it's something it's like a hard no. Yeah. With teens, there's going to be a little bit, which is my next one, like being open to listening and negotiate and notice if you can be flexible. I mean, a lot of kiddos with ADHD who are really, you know, impulsive still and might not want to check in with you about things and they'll just go and do it perhaps. Or, you know, it's like, how do you not lose it? But staying in a bit of negotiation, because especially kids who are rebelling, because it's likely they might go and do it anyway. So it's kind of like, hey, look, this is still my answer as a parent. You know, ultimately, if you go and decide to do it, that is going to erode trust, you know. But if you are going to do it, this is the safety parameters I'd like you to do it in. It's a tricky, delicate balance. And you're going to be learning on the go as a parent. And it's going to flop sometimes and it's going to land awesome the next time.
Yep. No, I can definitely vouch for that one for sure. You are giving some amazing tips today. I love those. You know, you've sort of laid out. I kind of feel like we need to put it into some sort of guide. Do you have any more before I go to the next question?
Oh yeah, mindful. Super quick, but we're going to come back to it. We've got to notice our own behaviors as parents. You got to notice how reactive you're being for all your kids, teens, not teens. Because if you're a kiddo or a teenager who's meeting with me right now in this podcast, what would they say about how you manage stress, or what you're like when you're upset and angry, or when you're stressed, right? Like,
that might be a good exercise for listeners today to actually ask their teen. I'm curious.
How do I show up? What would my kiddo say? Yeah. What am I like when I'm activated or when I'm upset? I mean, even me, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, no guilt whatsoever to anyone listening out there. You know, there, I can tell you, I am not the perfect parent. We all try our hardest, that's for sure. Well, let's dive into that because, you know, it is so hard. Like we can't just talk about the kids, you know, we need to sort of take care of our own nervous system. And, you know, when things feel tense and triggering at home, like what are some of those signs a parent might be dysregulated, or their nervous system might be dysregulated even when, you know, they think they're staying calm? Because there's moments where I think, oh yeah, no, I'm doing well, and it just doesn't turn out the way that I thought it was going to go.
Yeah. I had a parent the other day say, oh, I was just really trying to stay calm and I was using all of your tools, Ashley, But my kids were so, like, she had 2 teens, were so upset with me and said that I was being passive aggressive. And I was like, well, let's walk through. Were you actually calm and regulated? Well, no, on the inside, I was so agitated and annoyed, but I was trying to be calm. And I was like, that's not how they're going to pick up on this, guy, especially ADHD. So, and I've talked about this before, I'd rather parents choose congruency and authenticity over calm, which is your insides kind of got to match your outside. If you're working so hard to stay calm when on the inside you're like, I'm absolutely about to explode, it's actually really dysregulating in that interpersonal neurobiology. Your kid's going to pick up on it. You're much better off saying, and I said to her, why not go in and go, guys, I'm feeling really annoyed right now. I've asked 100 times for this room to be cleaned before you go off. I think it was Halloween. And I'm feeling really annoyed. So I'm going to go take some space. I'm going to come back and try to be helpful. Like, that's going to land in a much more authentic way than if you're like, I don't really like you to clean it, you know? And so it was like getting to know yourself a lot better, because we've worked with lots of parents down it. It's not easy to be calm. And it's not even human and normal to be calm when your kids agitated you, but it's noticing when we're actually able to share a feeling versus I'm fully triggered and activated and now I'm yelling and screaming. Like, that's when you're actually outside of regulation and we're triggered. And most of the parents who land in our programs at the beginning, they're usually at burnout and overwhelm, and they're in that reactivity. And so my recommendation is getting to know yourself better, your triggers, get in touch with your emotions, and actually being curious, like, what are your triggers and what might that actually also be about? And what beliefs and feelings might you be trying to squash and repress to be calm? And, that what actually is kind of going on for you. So, like, for example, quick example, I've got this dad I've been working with in the program, and he's given me permission to share this story because it's, been a little work, a lot of progress in the making, but he was so activated and triggered by his kids' behavior feeling disrespectful. So they'd quite quickly get in this loop of like, that's disrespectful. You can't treat your mum like that. I couldn't do this in my day. And so he would end up flipping his lid. So his kid would be shouting, swearing, kicking, all that aggressive stuff we see. And dad would be eventually matching the energy, screaming, yelling, threatening. And I was, and he was so stuck on this. It just feels so disrespectful, so disrespectful. I was like, okay, so there's this belief getting activated that you don't feel respected. What else is going on in there? And through some unpacking, our nervous system usually gets really triggered and activated because our nervous system stores a lot of our past experiences or beliefs. So, if something makes you feel like you're a failure, or you're getting it wrong, or you're not good enough, we're going to have a bigger reaction. Yeah, because it's kind of touching on these core beliefs that we've developed. And through unpacking, it turned out in his own childhood experiences, if you were to be disrespectful, that was coming with some very, very, actually quite scary stuff. So his nervous system would actually get really activated seeing disrespect, because his nervous system's going, no, this is scary. We have to shut it down. Does that kind of make sense? Like, there's a
my gosh. Yes.
Child reading that plays out too for us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just this work. I mean, just even sharing that story, Ashley, I can tell that it would have touched so many people out there. Because look, we all grew up in a totally different life than what our kids are experiencing right now. Most of us grew up in the like, that is disrespectful.
Squash the behavior, squash the feeling, squash the behavior.
Exactly. So it's like, we've got to break that cycle as well, that of that's what we're used to, that's our normal, that's what we're used to in and so we're going to parent the way that we were parented. But just even being aware of that is huge, and I think listeners can take so much out of just that awareness. Now, I mean, we could go on and on, Ashley. We are so over time, but this episode is just full of so much gold. think this is one of my favorite episodes. I want to listen to this one over and over again. But before we finish up, I ask every guest this. And you know I do, because you're a regular on the show. If you could just share one small actionable tip that parents can start using today, what would it be?
Oh, it's always hard for me to summarize in one. I could talk forever. One actionable tip, I would say like drop everything. Am I allowed to? Drop everything and go make an attempt to connect with your kid and just acknowledge and do that little repair I just gave example of earlier. Just drop everything, go and connect, even if it's a hug, a touch, just I love you no matter what. Just go and make an attempt to connect.
I love you no matter what. I don't know what it is, but the last week I've been extra emotional. I did a webinar on Tuesday night, and I think I cried 3 times. But that's beautiful, Ashley. I mean, wow, this conversation is one I just know is going to sit with a lot of parents for a long time, because, when we're stuck in these patterns, we didn't mean to create. It's not our fault. And we're saying things we never meant to say. It can feel overwhelming just to even know where to begin. But I think today was a reminder it's never too late to shift the energy in your home. Ashley, thank you for joining me today, sharing your wisdom, all of your experience, your practical tools. You always make sort of those hard parts of parenting just feel a little bit lighter and a lot more possible. Why don't you share with listeners where they can find more about your ADHD specific parenting program?
Yeah. So I've taken the last 15 years of wisdom and experience and knowledge and relevant research and woven it into the online program called the ADHD Thrive Jumpstart for Parenting program. So, the program has kind of helped hundreds of families already kind of step out of those struggles and constant battles and back into that confidence and control. And like you said, there's, you can't solve everything in one little podcast. It's like collecting everything everywhere. And yeah, it does take time, but gosh, you can make little shifts still so important. There's some awesome masterclasses in there, but yes, I'm sure we'll put that link in the show notes. Yes. And so you can find that program in there.
Yeah, and at ADHDthriveinstitute.com. Fantastic, Ashley. Thank you once again for joining me today. And listeners, if you're listening, which you obviously are because you're listeners, and found this episode helpful, just please take a moment. I want you guys today, and I know that I ask this often, but I want you guys today just to leave a quick review. I want you to let us know, what was the biggest takeaway from today's episode? Because for me, as I said, I think this is one of my favorite episodes in the 3 years that I've been doing the podcast. Just take a moment and share that with us, because your reviews really help guide what we bring to the show. But more importantly, they help more families raising kids with ADHD find this support, because every child, ADHD or not, deserves to soar. Listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Key, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at ADHDthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.